I wasn't supposed to be in the area that day. I'd taken a longer route home after picking up groceries just to enjoy the quiet roads and warm afternoon sun. It had been a strange week. I hadn't heard from my son David in days, not even a text. I told myself he was just busy. He had a life, a wife, and responsibilities. But deep inside, something didn't sit right. As I turned onto his street, a chill prickled across my neck. I slowed down. There it was, David's car, parked at the gate. That wouldn't be unusual, except he had told me he was out of town on business. I stopped the car slowly and turned off the engine. I didn't know why, but I didn't honk. I didn't even call. I just sat there in silence, watching the stillness of the house. No movement, no light. It was too quiet. I stepped out of the car and closed the door gently. My shoes crunched softly against the gravel as I walked toward the gate. The air felt heavier with each step. I could feel my heartbeat rising. I pressed the buzzer once, nothing, then twice, still nothing. I peered through the fence. His car was definitely there, dustless, freshly driven. But no sign of him or his wife. My stomach twisted. Something was off. The gate wasn't locked. That was odd. David always kept it locked. I slipped inside and followed the path up to the side of the house. My hands were cold now. I looked at the front door. Closed, curtains drawn. I knew better than to knock. Something inside told me not to announce myself. So I crept silently toward the side window, the one near the kitchen, where I used to see him cooking late-night snacks as a boy. And that's when I heard it. Voices. Faint. Heated. "She'll never find out," someone whispered harshly. Then another voice. Female. "She's old, not stupid. She'll figure it out. And when she does..." The man interrupted. "She's not even supposed to be here." I froze. They were talking about me. And that voice. David. My own son. My legs went weak, but I steadied myself by holding the windowsill. I leaned in, just enough to hear through the gap in the glass. "You promised me she wouldn't come back into our lives," the woman said. It was his wife. "I didn't marry into a retirement home. I married you, and I want that house. She can't live in it forever." He replied, his tone colder than I had ever heard before. "I know. I'm handling it. One way or another, we'll get her out." I stopped breathing. My hands trembled. Was this a nightmare? They weren't just talking behind my back. They were planning to push me out of my own home. The home my husband and I built with decades of sweat and sacrifice. I stepped back. I must have made a noise because suddenly the voices inside stopped. Then I heard her ask, "Did you hear that?" David's chair scraped against the floor. I turned and rushed back toward the front gate, my heart racing, my eyes stinging. As I reached the car, I saw the curtain move. His wife was watching. But I didn't stop. I got in, slammed the door and drove away with shaking hands. Before I dive in, feel free to let me know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy the story, a like and subscribe would mean a lot. Because what happened next, what I did next, it wasn't what they expected. And it shattered everything they thought they controlled. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every word echoing in my head. She can't live in it forever. We'll get her out. I had raised that boy, fed him when we had nothing, sold my jewelry so he could attend college. And now? Now he was planning with his wife to take the house from me. At one point, around 2 a.m., I sat up and reached for the framed photo on my nightstand. It was from David's wedding. I had stood beside him, smiling, holding his arm like the proudest mother in the world. I remember how his bride had hugged me with a practiced warmth, already calculating how to corner him completely. My fingers shook as I held the frame. Was it all fake from the beginning? I couldn't go back to sleep. By sunrise, I had made a decision. I needed to understand how deep this betrayal went. So, I decided to test them. At 9:30 a.m., I texted David. "Hey, sweetheart. I was in your area yesterday. Thought of stopping by but wasn't sure if you were home. Hope you're doing well." A message that gave him room to lie. And he did. 5 minutes later, the reply came. "Oh, we were out all day. Just got back late. Should have told you we were travelling again. Sorry, Mum." Out all day? I clenched my jaw. I had heard his voice inside that house. They weren't out. They were plotting. I replied simply, "No problem. Maybe next time." Then I put the phone down and stared out the window. There was a part of me that still wanted to believe this was all a misunderstanding. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe she had pressured him. Maybe. But deep down I knew. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment conversation I had overheard. This was a plan. And I had to act fast. Because if they were talking about taking my house, I needed to make sure I was 10 steps ahead of them. I grabbed a notepad and started writing everything I remembered from that night. Every word, every tone, every expression I saw through the window. I needed records. Then I made a second call. Not to David. To Charles. Charles was my late husband's old friend and our long-time lawyer. "Margaret," he answered, sounding surprised. "It's been a while. Everything okay?" "No," I said quietly. "I think my son and his wife are trying to take my house." He paused. "That's serious. You want to come in?" "I'm already halfway to your office," I said. "I'll see you in 10. Charles was the kind of man who didn't need many words. Once I explained what I heard, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long sigh. "I knew that boy changed after your husband passed," he said. "But I didn't expect this." "Neither did I whispered. "We reviewed the deed, the trust, everything my husband and I had arranged before his death. The house was in my name, protected. But Charles warned me." "They can still make things difficult," he said. "Forceful eviction tactics, manipulation, legal tricks, especially if they think you're vulnerable." I nodded slowly. "I'm not as vulnerable as they think." He smiled. "Good, because they're not ready for you." On my way home, I stopped at the grocery store. As I reached for a can of soup, I heard someone behind me say, "Mrs. Weller?" I turned. It was Rachel, David's wife's cousin. We'd only met twice, but she recognized me. "Oh, hi," I smiled politely, though my nerves prickled. "How are you?" She hesitated. I probably shouldn't say anything, but I saw something the other day that's been bothering me." I tilted my head. "What is it?" She glanced around. "I was at their house 2 days ago. They were going over your paperwork." David looked intense, like he was trying to find a loophole. His wife kept saying, "She's old. She'll forget. Just be patient." I didn't know what they meant, but now seeing you... My stomach dropped. It wasn't just a conversation. They were going through my private documents, scheming, breaking trust, breaking into my life. I thanked her with a trembling voice, then left the store without finishing my shopping. When I got home, I walked into the living room and just stood there. The house felt different now, not safe, like I was being watched. I took a deep breath. They wanted my house. They wanted me out. They were about to learn that I wasn't as naive or helpless as they thought. The next morning I made my move, but it started with a surprise visit. I drove back to David's house. This time I didn't stop at the gate. I walked right up to the door and knocked hard. Once, twice, 3 times. It flew open. David stood there, startled. "Mum," I smiled. "Can we talk?" He hesitated, glancing behind him. "I was just about to leave," he said, clearly nervous. "Oh," I said sweetly. "Then this won't take long." I stepped inside without waiting for permission, and what I saw in their living room made me stop in my tracks. There on the coffee table were my bank statements, my will, my husband's trust documents, laid out in the open like some kind of blueprint. David turned pale. "Mum, I can explain." "You'd better try," I said coldly. But before he could speak, his wife walked in from the hallway and stopped dead. She looked at me, then at the papers, then at David. She was about to speak when the front door slammed behind us, and a voice said, "Is this how you treat family?" We all froze, because the person standing there wasn't anyone we expected, and his presence changed everything. The silence that followed the slam of the front door could have cracked glass. All eyes turned. Standing there, in the open doorway, with the morning light spilling around him, was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 60s. He wore a dark trench coat and held a slim black folder under his arm. David's face drained of colour. His wife looked stunned, her mouth opening and closing without a sound. I recognised the man instantly. It was Mr. Aldridge, my late husband's private estate planner. He hadn't been in our lives since the funeral. So why now? He stepped forward and shut the door behind him gently. Then, with calm, deliberate steps, he walked into the living room, placed the folder neatly on the coffee table, on top of the stolen documents, and turned to face us. "Apologies for the intrusion," he said, his voice smooth but firm. "I believe this conversation concerns me more than any of you realise." David swallowed. "What are you doing here?" "I received a call," Mr. Aldridge said, glancing toward me. "From your mother." I nodded slowly. "I asked him to come," I said, "to witness what you've been doing behind my back." David shot me a glare, but his expression was slipping, fear creeping in at the edges. "I didn't do anything illegal," he muttered. Aldridge raised a brow. "You opened private estate documents that do not belong to you. That's a start." David's wife crossed her arms. "Those are her things, and she's his mother. You're acting like we broke into a bank." Aldridge didn't flinch. "I represent the entirety of your late father's estate," he said, his tone tightening. "And there's something neither of you seem to know, because your father, God rest his soul, planned ahead. Far more than either of you expected." I blinked. "What do you mean?" Aldridge turned to me. "Margaret, may I?" I nodded, heart pounding. He opened the folder, pulled out a thick white envelope sealed with wax. "This," he said, holding it up for David and his wife to see, "was left in my possession to be delivered only if I ever received word that someone was trying to contest, manipulate, or seize your estate without consent." David stared. "What?" "It's a clause," Aldridge continued. "Your husband didn't trust your son's judgment after he married." His voice softened. He hoped he was wrong, but he prepared in case he wasn't. He handed me the envelope. I hesitated, then cracked the wax. Inside was a letter, handwritten. I recognized the handwriting immediately. My husband's. The words swam for a moment as I blinked back tears. "If you're reading this, Maggie, then I was right to worry." My fingers trembled as I continued. "David may be our son, but he's changed. I saw it in his eyes at the wedding. If he ever tries to take what's yours, this letter gives Aldridge full legal right to intervene. Everything, the house, the trust, the accounts, they're yours alone. He is not to receive a cent unless you decide so willingly." I looked up, stunned. David was frozen. His wife's mouth hung open. "Wait, so she can cut us out?" "She already has," Aldridge replied. "This document, combined with her existing title rights, supersedes any inheritance claim." No, this is insane," David snapped. "You can't just do this, I'm her son." "And yet," I said, voice cold, "you went through my drawers, dug into my papers, lied to my face, plotted with your wife to take my house." His voice cracked. "Mum, I didn't mean—" "Don't lie again." I stood, taller than I'd felt in years. Aldridge slid another paper toward David. "This is a formal cease and desist. You are not to contact your mother regarding her assets or estate." Any attempt to do so will be seen as legal harassment. David looked like he'd been slapped. "You're cutting me off," he whispered. I felt a sharp ache in my chest, but I nodded. "Until you remember who you are, yes." His wife scoffed. "Fine. We don't need her money anyway." Aldridge looked amused. "Really? Then perhaps you shouldn't have defaulted on your credit card 3 days ago, or be 6 months behind on your mortgage." She blinked, stunned. "Credit score's a funny thing," he added lightly. David was trembling now. "You did this on purpose. You brought him here to humiliate us." "No," I said. "I brought him here to protect myself." I turned to leave, but paused at the door and looked over my shoulder. "One more thing," I said quietly. "Don't come to the house. Don't call, don't text, until you're ready to apologize for everything. And mean it." Then I walked out, back into the daylight, and as I shut their front door behind me, I felt a strange stillness. Not peace exactly, but power. For the first time in years, I felt like I had taken my life back. But the story doesn't end there. Because that same night, I received a call, a blocked number. I almost didn't pick up, but something told me to listen. "Hello?" I said. Silence. Then a voice, crying. "Mom. David. Please, I made a mistake. She was the one who pushed it. I didn't know it would go this far." I held the phone tightly. "You let it." I know, but please, I need to see you. Just once, please. I'll come to the house." I said nothing. "Please, Mom." But I didn't say yes. I just ended the call. I needed time to think, because I still hadn't told him one last secret his father left behind, a secret that would change everything, and not in his favor. That night, I sat by the fireplace, the letter from my late husband clutched in my hand. The air felt thick with memories, his voice, his smile, his steady presence. I stared at the flickering flames, wondering how things had gotten this far. Our son had once been the boy who collected fireflies and cried when I got a paper cut. Now he was a man who let greed twist his soul, who let his wife speak louder than his conscience. The phone hadn't rung again. No texts. Just that one broken call, his voice choked in regret or maybe fear. But it didn't matter. Apologies mean nothing when the knife's still warm. And there was something David didn't know. Something his father had prepared for years ago. A second envelope. I had forgotten about it until I went searching through the box my husband had labelled, "Only if you have to." I'd laughed when he packed it, told him he was being dramatic, but he just kissed my forehead and said, "Better to be ready than sorry." Inside that box, under an old Navy photo of us from 1972, I found it. A smaller, slimmer envelope. Sealed. Addressed in that same confident handwriting. "To Margaret, only if David betrays you." My fingers went cold. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a USB stick. The note read, "You'll know when it's time. Plug this in and let the truth come out." I stared at the tiny device. What was on here? My husband had been meticulous. He never acted without reason. I turned it over in my hand, the metal surface catching the firelight. It felt heavier than it should. The next morning I drove to Aldridge's office. No appointment. Just walked in and waited outside his door until he waved me inside. "What's happened?" he asked, concerned. I slid the USB across the desk. "My husband left this. Said to use it if David ever turned against me." Aldridge looked at it, then at me. "Did he?" I nodded slowly. "Completely." He didn't ask anything else, just inserted the USB into his secure laptop and opened the only file inside. It was a video. We watched together in silence. My husband sat at his desk looking older than I remembered. "If you're seeing this, then I was right," he began. "And I hate that I was right. But I couldn't ignore the way David changed. The moment he started hiding things from us. The way he treated Maggie during dinner when he thought I wasn't listening. The way his wife whispered things when she thought we weren't in the room. So, I've created a fallback. The video shifted to show a set of documents, deeds, transfers, passwords, hidden accounts. My eyes widened. This, my husband said, is everything they don't know exists. Assets I've protected from public record. Funds in your name, Maggie. And one property, one they'll never find unless you decide to tell them. My throat tightened. You always gave everything to the family, he continued, voice trembling slightly. Now it's your turn to be safe. If David turns on you, you walk away. Don't fight, don't explain. Just take what's yours and go. The screen went black. Aldridge exhaled slowly. Your husband was a very prepared man. I didn't even know about this, I whispered. That's how you know he was protecting you, Aldridge said. He knew the less you knew, the safer you'd be until it mattered. He printed out the document list. There were assets in my name I never even knew existed. A beachfront home 2 states away, a trust account worth nearly $500,000, and a clause buried deep in the property deed to my current house. If I was ever pressured or harassed, the house would legally transfer to a private trust that David had no access to, permanently cutting off his rights to the estate. That was when I made my decision. That night, I began packing. Not everything. Just enough to leave quickly. I took photo albums. My husband's dog tags. The ceramic tea set from my mother. The rest? They could keep it. Let them tear through the house, looking for ways to win. I already had the victory. I scheduled the transfer with Aldridge for the next morning. The house would move into the trust by noon. By sundown, it wouldn't even show up in my name on public records. But I wasn't leaving without a final act, a reminder, a lesson. I drove to David's house one last time. This time I didn't bother with the door. I left a box on the porch, rang the bell and walked away. Inside the box was a copy of the legal documents showing the house transfer, a burned copy of the video his father had made, and a note in my handwriting. This is what betrayal costs you. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw the front door open. David stood there holding the box. Our eyes met for just a moment. No anger, no shouting, just silence. The kind that lingers in your bones. The kind that says, you did this to yourself. I didn't cry on the way home. I didn't rage. I felt calm. Like a storm had passed, and I was finally standing on solid ground again. By noon, the house transfer was complete. By 3 p.m., I was on the road. The beachfront house was quiet, clean, and filled with light. My husband had bought it in secret, just for me. I could almost hear his voice as I opened the door. Welcome home, Maggie. And for the first time in months, I believed it. But just when I thought the past was behind me, David sent me a letter, handwritten, no return address, no apology, just a single sentence. You don't understand what you've started. And that was when I realized he wasn't done. The letter sat on my counter for 2 days before I opened it again. You don't understand what you've started. That sentence had replayed in my head over and over. It wasn't just a message. It was a warning, a threat, a bitter cry from someone who had lost control and wasn't willing to accept it. I had read it the first time with anger, but now I read it with clarity. I hadn't just walked away from my son's grasp. I had severed a cord he believed would always tether me to him, no matter how far he pushed, no matter what he did. For so long, I thought that was what motherhood meant. Unconditional forgiveness. But this wasn't a scraped knee or a broken window. This was betrayal in its purest form. I tucked the letter into the back of my journal, not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder, a timestamp of when I stopped being afraid of his disappointment and started choosing peace. A week passed in the beach house. Mornings filled with ocean air and the smell of coffee, the pages of my old books fluttering by as I sat on the back deck. For a moment, I started to believe the worst was over, that David's silence meant resignation. But on the 8th day, I received a call from Aldridge. His tone was firm, professional, but I caught the undertone of urgency. "Margaret, you need to come in." "What's wrong?" I asked. "There's been movement. David hired a third-party investigator. He's trying to prove you're mentally unfit to hold the estate." I stood frozen, my fingers tightening around the phone. "What?" "He's claiming emotional instability, fabricating incidents. He submitted a report to the estate board alleging that you've been manipulated into these decisions due to mental decline." I laughed, a hollow, sharp sound. "He's saying I'm crazy?" "Yes, and unfortunately he's done enough homework to make it messy." I clenched my jaw. "He can't win." "No, but we'll have to fight, publicly, if it comes to that." I sat down slowly. The ocean breeze that had felt like a blessing now felt like a reminder of how far I'd had to run. I'd thought distance would keep me safe. But David wasn't interested in space. He wanted what he thought was his, even if he had to destroy me for it. "Aldridge," I said quietly, "what are our options?" "We strike first." "What do you mean?" "Your husband's private files contain more than financial records. There's documentation, emails, voice recordings, a journal, outlining incidents where David and his wife attempted to manipulate you while your husband was still alive. He logged everything." "Why?" "Because he knew this day would come. He just didn't want to believe it would." I closed my eyes. "Then let's use it." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the quiet house, listening to the gentle crash of waves outside. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the flickering candlelight and wondering how a child I raised with love could turn into this. My husband had seen the shift before I did. I had been too close, too hopeful, too blind. But I wasn't anymore. I opened the folder Aldridge had sent me digitally and listened to the recordings. One, in particular, froze my blood. A recording from 5 years ago. My husband's voice calm and steady, speaking into his private recorder. "David came by again today. Asked about the will. Maggie doesn't know. He framed it as concern, but the way he asked, it wasn't love. It was strategy. He's planning something. I can feel it. I hope I'm wrong." Another clip. "His wife said something strange during dinner. She asked if Maggie still took her memory medication. Maggie doesn't take any medication. I think they're building a case. I've started locking up the paperwork. Maggie would never suspect this, but I see it. It's happening." I stopped the audio. I couldn't breathe for a moment. All those years I thought I was being paranoid. They were planting the idea of my instability from the beginning. My hands shook as I closed the laptop. The next morning, I dressed in navy slacks and a white blouse. Simple, clean, calm. I needed to look like everything they said I wasn't. Sharp, composed, completely in control. I met Aldridge at his office. His assistant handed me a stack of notarized documents and a legal letter of response. It was bold, aggressive, exactly what David wouldn't expect. "We'll submit this to the estate board tomorrow," Aldridge said. "But if you want to go further—" "I do," I said, voice steel. He nodded. "Then we go to court." I didn't flinch. I had been through worse than this. I had buried my husband, raised a child alone, survived cancer in my 40s. I wasn't about to be erased by my own son's ambition. That afternoon, the press caught wind. David had filed early requests for estate review and someone leaked the story. My phone buzzed with calls from journalists. I ignored them all, except one, an old friend, Anna. She had been my closest companion during the years when David was still young, back when we lived 2 streets apart and spent our mornings pushing strollers through the park. Her voice was warm, concerned, but firm. "Maggie, tell me this isn't true." "It's worse than you think," I said quietly. We met for tea that night in a quiet cafe near the shoreline. I told her everything. From the window incident to the USB to the recordings and the fabricated medical claims. When I finished, she looked at me with wet eyes. "You always gave him everything," she whispered. "And this is how he repays you." I nodded. "But I'm not going to let him win," I said. Anna placed her hand on mine. "You won't, and I'll stand beside you if you need me." For the first time since it all began, I felt the tightness in my chest loosen. But back at the beach house, a message awaited me. It was slid under the door. No stamp. No delivery notice. Just a folded piece of paper with one sentence. "Don't forget, I know things too." There was no signature, but I didn't need one. The war had just escalated. The note sat on my kitchen table like a loaded gun. "Don't forget, I know things too." I read it again. No address, no stamp, no envelope. Someone had driven out here and slid it under my door. David. It had to be. A coward's message written by a man backed into a corner. But what exactly did he think he knew? That night I checked every lock twice. Then I sat by the window watching the driveway, one eye on the moonlight and the other on my own thoughts. My hand hovered over my phone, tempted to call Aldridge, but I knew he'd just say what I already knew. The message wasn't a threat. It was bait. David wanted me to react, to fear, to panic, but he'd forgotten who raised him. I don't shake easily. The next morning I didn't call anyone. I drove, not to Aldridge, not to the court, to him, David. I needed to look him in the eyes one last time, not for reconciliation, for resolution. I pulled up to their house just before noon. The curtains were open. The car was in the driveway. I walked up and knocked. 3 beats. Then the door opened. David stood there in sweats, hair messy, eyes dark from sleeplessness. "You," he muttered. "Me," I said, stepping forward. He moved aside slowly, and I walked in like I had 100 times before. But this time, it wasn't my heart that was heavy. It was his. I sat down on the same couch where my private documents had once been scattered like prey on a hunting table. He didn't sit. "I sent you that note," he said. "I know what Dad hid. I know about the house. I know about the trust." I tilted my head. "Then you should also know that none of it belongs to you." His jaw clenched. "He was my father. And I was your mother. Still am. That used to mean something." Silence. I stood and walked slowly across the room to the window, the same window I had once stood outside when this whole nightmare began. I turned and looked at him. Really looked. He looked like a shell. Not the boy I raised. Not even the man I once hoped he'd become. Just a collection of bad choices and borrowed rage. "What do you want, David?" He laughed once, sharp, bitter. "I wanted to win," he said. "I wanted to not be the son who was overlooked, the one who married wrong, the one who didn't get the same kind of love." My lips parted slightly. "You always had love," I said quietly, "but you wanted control." "I wanted to be enough." "You were," I said, "but you let her convince you otherwise." His eyes shimmered then, just for a second. Then the wall came back up. "I'm not here to fight you," I said, walking to the door. "I'm here to end this." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I turned to him. "By the time you wake up tomorrow, the courts will have the final ruling. Your motion to contest the estate is dismissed. The recordings, the documents, they've already been reviewed. The judge saw through you. There is nothing left to challenge." He said nothing. I reached into my purse and placed something on the table. The original letter from his father. "Read it, or don't, but it's the last gift you'll ever get from him." As I walked out, I expected to hear shouting, but he didn't say a word. Just silence. I got in my car and drove away without looking back. Back at the beach house, the air was clearer than it had been in weeks. I stepped out onto the back deck, barefoot, a hot mug of tea warming my hands. I watched the waves, watched the gulls soar. and for the first time in a long time, I felt something return to my chest. Stillness. Not because I won, but because I refused to lose myself again. David never came to see me after that. He didn't write again. But 6 months later, I got an anonymous card in the mail. One sentence. I saw the letter. I remember now. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Some lessons don't need words. Some wounds only heal when the bleeding stops. And mine finally had.